Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you very much for attending this amazing event. My name is Abril, and first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Stefano Odorico, and University of Bremen for inviting us and having organized this amazing event. My talk is entitled Interactive Documentary as a Tool for Research, and basically I will divide my presentation in two parts. The first part I will explain how I divided my research, how I structure my research, because I conceived as a transmedia strategy, doing my PhD research on interactive documentary. And the second part that I will explain is about a set of case studies I will share with you, in which I was involved in terms of applying interactive documentary as a tool for research, trying to convince you that this could be a good tool for research. I have no doubt about that. So first of all, I will share you three basic ideas. The first of them is this one. If you work eventually, or you have worked in communication studies, cultural studies in general, there are three big key areas: production, training, and research, and sub-areas like, for example, if you work in research, you can do some kind of diffusion and dissemination of your work through, for example, articles or blogs. If you produce, you can organize, for example, events, festivals, workshops, like Stefano did. If you do some kind of lecturing or training, you can do some kind of management for your company, university, etc. Some of the people here, I'm sure, that are working more than in one field of this, more or less. You are merging sometime production and training, or researching and training. So to me, it was very important in my research trying to merge all these three areas, which is very complicated, but in the end, I think that you can take benefit from all of them. So this is my first idea. The second idea here is like, I thought, okay, if interactive documentary could spread to different platforms, for example, like cinema, websites, virtual reality, etc., and the same goes for the transmedia documentary, and the transmedia narrative as well, why not we could spread research on several platforms as well, in order to reach a wider audience. So this was my hypothesis when I was starting my PhD in 2007 in Barcelona, in Pompeu Fabra University, and then basically I just did my best in order to make connections, in order to create this structure possible. It was very complicated as well, but in the end I will show you how from my research and doctoral thesis I made some kind of these areas, a big area of confluence. In terms of research, for example, I became in 2011 a contributing editor and collaborator of iDocs, for example, as with a conference with Judith, Sandra, and Mandy, and with the Open Documentary Lab. In dissemination, I run two blogs, for example, Interdoc. I will show you briefly now, if I am able to do online. Interdoc is a well-known place for Latin American interactive documentary believers, let's say this way. And I run a blog as well from Spanish TV called Web Docs, Stories from the 21st Century. In terms of production, for example, I work on a project, a very ambitious project called Coming Doc. I will give you 5 cents after about this project as a case study, and organize the interactive and transmedia activities from Docs Barcelona. And basically as training or lecturing at the SCAC, the University of Barcelona, and ERAM, where I do management as well, because we have a very interesting structure. I want to share in 2 minutes with you, because I think which is kind of interesting. So I will show you briefly these two parts. This is the website, I told you before. This is the website. It's quite difficult because I have to do this, but I will do my best. So here we have, for example, Interdoc, this kind of research place. The first resource in Spanish written. There's only 2 resources in Spanish. It's a pity, but should be more, but eventually we'll do it. Basically, we do articles, we create some structure of group of researchers as well. And the other thing I'm very proud of is in the University of Girona. In the University of Girona, we have this school of audiovisual and multimedia. And what we have is, we create in the showroom, you can see all of these projects in English. Of course, it's in Spanish and Catalan. But what we create is, basically we work on a structure which is defined by 8 students, combined with 8 mentors. Each mentor is a specialist in one area, I mean post-production, script, coding, design, etc. And in 4 months we create basically non-fiction, fiction, and company transmedia projects. So in the end, we gather groups of 15, 20 people working for 5 months in a very tight schedule to produce, and in the last 4 years we have produced more than 21 final degree transmedia projects with this scheme in Girona, which I'm very proud because I'm the coordinator and the transmedia tutor of these projects, and we have won several awards, for example in the European Youth Award in Austria, or the Interactive Digital Stories track in Madeira Film Institute with the MITI, the Madeira Interactive Technologies Institute, for example. So this is some of the things in which you can work if you are doing some kind of research of like that. So this is another idea of fusioning these key areas. And basically, if we go to look for some ideas or some projects, if we just have a look to the early days of narrative expression forms, we see how, for example, through paintings, sculpture, written books, even photography, all took from earlier research. So if even before this, or even after, in the 19th, 20th century, with the optical toys, with the cinematograph, kinetoscope from Edison, for example, even in fiction and non-fiction, with movies from Lumiere's, for example, etc. Before and after, there's a research. Even in the inventions, before the inventions, there's a huge research to get to this point in the inventions. And I want to focus my second part of my presentation in projects, in case studies. In this sense, I think that a very relevant form of expression of documentaries is the form of the meta-documentary. The form of the meta-documentary is a documentary that talks about documentaries itself. There's a good and interesting framework of what, although it's a virgin space of basically of research, I will just list few of them, and I will just talk briefly about this idea, because to me it's very important about the relation between interactive documentary and research. Of course, we have to start with this project. All of you know about that, The Man with the Movie Camera from Zigaberto from 1929. And it's very interesting because it's not about the past, this project, because in a poll, in a very important poll that the British Film Institute and the Sight and Sound documentary Sight and Sound magazine, from United Kingdom, in where Judith and myself were invited. We voted for the, let's say, the greatest documentaries of all time. That's a very interesting point, and you can imagine, you can guess which is the best documentary ever by most critics. The Man with the Movie Camera. No? So more or less, I think that that's all set, that a documentary and a meta-documentary, because at that point was a real moment of course, exhibition and research about that, creating a documentary. If we go on the digital realm, we can find other works, for example, Capturing Reality, The Art of Documentary, from Pepita Ferrari, from the National Film Board of Canada, very nice film about linear documentarians, the big ones like Werner Herzog, Errol Morris, etc. It's a big resource done from the big one, the National Film Board of Canada. If we go on the academic realm, we can find, for example, this experimental webdoc, WhatsApp webdoc, from students from Université Paul Valéry Montpellier 3 in France. It's about the French webdoc, focus on the French webdoc basically. And another big and nice project created from Atalanti Dionysus, The Journey of Documentary, 2014, Australia, while she was doing her master's degree and PhD on interactive documentary. She created a very well-crafted web series about the evolution of documentaries, has won several awards as well. And more recent developments, I really like very much this project, Biology of a Story, from Canada again, one of the big producers in the field, from Anna Buchwilder and Ilios Design Labs. Of course, Mike Robbins is behind. It's like very, very beautiful crafted, this project. It's not about the documentary itself, but the story, how we generate and how we create basically the stories. This is more or less, there's more, but to me these are the more relevant meta-documentaries, and all of them, just the base is research, and I will just finish my presentation with some case studies and conclusions. In relation to case studies in which I was involved, that's the particular thing here in case studies, I will show you, I want to share with you Metamental Doc is our experimental thing in Spain. It's in Spanish, I'm sorry, or maybe you can understand, but what we work here in the students from the University of Vic, my previous university, was create some kind of platform in which basically you can navigate. Here you have the website. So the students use in different grades this kind of as a second virtual campus. There's a game, there's a forum, there's the projects, written projects, like it's a meta documentary. They elaborate and explain how to create a documentary. There's a feature documentary of 50 minutes of the best documentaries according to the student research. And there's an interactive documentary. This interactive documentary has a lot of parts. You can split the feature documentary. You have some kind of interviews as well with the major experts in Spain that you can interview, and you can do a playlist, and then you can consult afterwards your playlist. You have basically a virtual room with more than 300 documents, all quoted and downloadable in Spanish, free of rights, of course, and all the festivals around the world. And you have a historical background with Spanish documentarians and documentarians around the world. So we have more or less, we gather here more than 150 documentarians. So I think this is a valuable, really valuable resource about documentary. And it's another way to study documentary. Not maybe you don't want to read, you don't like to read. You have this platform and you can consult, and you can even make marks and quotes using this interface. So this is our approach, and we took 3 years to develop with the students these platforms with the laboratory from the University of Big. So this was the first case study. The second one is Coming Doc. Coming Doc is an attempt to translate my PhD, my research, into something practical for people who want to study online, creating a transmedia meta-documentary. But I will show you a video. If you agree, I will show you a little video, and I think that it's more understandable in 2 minutes what is Coming Doc. Just it's here. Okay, here we go. So these are my hypotheses from my research, which I try to answer in my PhD, and then I translated into basic questions, and I interviewed 60 experts, to me, the experts in the field from the period 2012 to 2016, and then from these 60 experts, I create several other parts. For example, we have a documentary series that each month is uploaded to Open Documentary Lab, for example. You have a web platform as well, more educational. So you have videos, for example, about the story of the interactive documentary. This is all available online for free. I mean, it's just... Okay. And in this way of making research and using the platform of interactive documentary, in more like for mainstream or for TV. We create from Televisió de Catalunya, from Catalan Autonomous Television, some kind of interactives. Televisió de Catalunya, in Catalonia we have a telethon, which is 24 hours long, in December for diseases each year. So we create, it's a big, huge transmedia project composed by the telethon program of the TV, CDs, books, etc., but as well training in school. So these interactive things. The first one was about cancer diseases. It was very simple. The second one was about, maybe the best one was this. We use the metaphor of the labyrinth in terms of neurodegenerative diseases. And here we use the metaphor of the labyrinth for the cells, for the neurons, for the synapses. And we create this interface. It was very gamified and immersive at that point. So all of these projects, and the last one was about the heart diseases. We create a game and some kind of questions. In the end, you have to get your diploma. So the idea of that, before we worked 6 months with doctors making research, making medical research in order to be able to make some competent interactive projects. So to me, it's very interesting to show you these projects. And the last project I want to show you is Cyber Project. This is about a man who has a disease. He's not able to see colors, only he's able to see in black and white. And we create this transmedia documentary. We create several platforms, we create different things. And well, you can see, for example, here a summary of the project. And basically, we research a lot with Neil Harbison, who is the main character of this project, who is this guy who used some kind of eye on his head in order to translate nouns. He translates basically this device, translate notes into colors, more or less. It's quite complicated stage. You have to go through the project if you want to find out the truth. But the good thing here is that we did a lot of research with him in order to create some kind of platforms that could translate into people what is not perceiving colors in life. So we developed, like you see, a feature documentary, a transmedia documentary, few apps. It was a long project. It was 3 or 4 years of developing. So I think that is another example of how you can use kind of research and then apply and try to reach an audience using basically storytelling and using what the most interest to me, which is basically transmedia storytelling. You can see and you can access all these projects online. And now I will finish my presentation with the conclusion, which is this one. I think that we can use transmedia narrative as a way to disseminate our research using several things, for example, words, like articles or blogs, organizing events, festivals, congresses, etc., and above all, with images, creating audiovisual, interactive, and transmedia works. Each area uses different strategies, but the good thing is to reach wide audiences is that the researchers should merge some of them. Basically, I think that transmedia narrative could be applied to research basically in 2 directions, either during the research period itself. Imagine that qualitative and quantitative data could be used, for example, using surveys, focus groups, user tests, and this can be understood as multiple platforms. Why not? Taking this data and transforming and allowing the user to understand this data, understanding as multiple platforms. And basically, the second one is to explain or represent the research results using basically fiction and non-fiction interactive genres. As I said I demonstrated in my first part of this presentation. And then you can use, for example, in terms of journalism, visualization of data, diagrams, infographics, reportage, multimedia specials, documentaries. The people talk widely here, so I'm not going inside, basically, or more experimental like film or reading essays, educational formats, or applications for museums. That could be very useful to use in order to expand or spread your research. So basically, doing that, you can engage, to my opinion, and make people understand your research, which normally uses technical words, and it's quite complicated to understand in terms of a very boring written paper or PhD or whatever. With all respect, but you can use these strategies that transmedia narrative offers to you in order to expand your story or create your narrative. And basically, my final idea is that imagine that you are doing a PhD or a research and you are going through different stages, and in every stage you make connections you talk to people, you go to conference, you attend workshops, and then you can unify, you can create a unity within these connections, and in the end, basically, the day you defend your PhD or whatever in front of an audience or jury, you can, it's a performance, more or less, like today, and you can defend and you can show a central piece, but then some kind of satellites, some kind of expanded things that could make people easier to understand what you are doing. This was my idea 10 years ago. I did not make everything I wanted, but some of them, yeah, I wanted to share with you my part of my life. And okay, where am I exactly? I'm trying to, my postdoctoral focus research is about interactive and transmedia nonfiction, and trying to map this new area in which we are living maybe the second, third, or fourth VR revolution, who knows? But my idea is trying to focus this virgin and unexplored place called interactive and transmedia nonfiction. Thank you very much.
So, fantastic, as usual, I would say. So I attended so far several of your presentations, but I'm always impressed about how prolific you are. I mean, the amount of projects that you presented today is like just incredible. Just one comment, like very brief about. I mean, there is a lot, obviously, of content, but what is really interesting is how you. I mean, it's great how you translate, all what you do into research in iDocs, but also how you use research applied to your teaching, which is quite key in all the projects you presented today. So that's something really interesting to like to explore further later, the idea of teaching as a practice. So let's see if there's any questions. Question? Yeah, Nick.
Well, actually impressed by how prolific you are. I was just wondering, in your experience of making so many transmedia iDocs sort of projects, apart from student projects, how you found it in terms of funding them? Is it the broadcasters, or is it cultural institutions, and what are they looking for? Because in your last project, the cyborg project, it did look as though it was perhaps a complement to a documentary, and I was wondering if this was how you saw the funding situation.
The funding situation is quite critical, especially in Spain and Latin American countries. The first project I've shown you were auto-financed. I mean, for example, Coming Dog, and were experiments which I was very lucky to do in my universities, University of Vic, University of Girona, because I was in charge of the multimedia production final degree projects. So it was easy to me to create with the students, not for my ideas, but them, but as using as case studies for my research, as MetaMental Doc is a clear example of creating a platform. But I will say in one sentence, since I was 35, all my projects were auto-financed, and I was ruined about that. And then some broadcasters in Spain started to say, okay, let's create some kind of cyber project or whatever. So it's very difficult in Spain to create this kind of stories in terms of funding. It's very experimental. I think in the world, more or less, besides maybe Canada and France, the same situation. And I was in Prague, in the Institute platform. I was very lucky there in March. And I talked with people from Canada, from France, about, who whispers me about the situation in the world, about the interactive documentary. And there's maybe, it's good, but there's bad news as well, because it seems that the formula could be basically the 3 platforms nowadays for big broadcasters. Let's say the feature documentary, long documentary form, short forms like video clips, like short movies, like etc. Because this works with young people. They are competing against YouTube, for example, and finally immersion, VR, 360, whatever. So it seems that this formula is what they are financing so far. So where is interactive documentary here? It's here, I think. It's in education. It's in research, it's in social activism, it's in other fields, but maybe it will never be a mainstream, because for broadcasters it's very complicated to produce, and I think that it's a problem that Stefano in the book, I think it's very relevant, about digital preservation, digital heritage. Because if Flash doesn't work, what does it mean? Half of the interactive docs don't work anymore. So I think that's a huge thing. I keep to think about that and to reflect, and today in the round table we can go further.
Thank you very much. Good question? A question over there? No? Sorry. Just so Julie.
I was just going to say that for me, my hope is that the short form, we can kind of subvert that and take the short form back into all this interactive work we've been doing. So at my university, actually what I'm doing now, my teaching now on the course where I've grown iDocs, now it's the short form that's taken over from the multi-platform transmedia interactive documentary. So it's very real, and I think we have to take the short form. So as soon as you've got the short form, if you've got many short forms, you need an interface, and then maybe we can bring it back in.
Web series, for example, making some kind of little interaction and trying to mix or unify this kind of web series could be a formula.
Yeah.
We have to reinvent again.
Exactly. I think
But
we've
I
got to
think
subvert
that-
it and reclaim it.
Yeah, because.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.